So, just a quick talk about the multiverse, the idea of a multiverse. Now, a multiverse is supposed to be, at least the lay person understanding of it is, infinite copies of one universe that are slightly different from each other, or infinitely copies of many universes that are so different from each other. So in terms of the different scale, you can have a scale from they're all the same to they're so different from each other. They have no relationship to each other at all. So you have all these individual universes that are all linked together, or you have the individual on the other extreme, you have the infinite copies or infinite number of universes that have absolutely nothing to do with each other. They can never interact with each other in any way, shape, or form through any physical or any known process. They are totally isolated, and yet there are an infinite number of them. Now, what I'm trying to say in this podcast is that both extremes are the same. If you have a universe that can never interact with any other universe, then it might as well be alone. It is alone, essentially. Because if you find yourself in that universe, then you have no relationship whatsoever. You can't even know that a multiverse or another universe exists. You can never test for it. It can never affect you in any way. So you are in a universe, not a multiverse. On the other extreme, where you have infinite copies, infinite universes that are maybe all the same or slightly different from each other with different physical laws and all that, then as long as those universes have some type of relationship to each other, if one universe is constraining the output or the natural law formation in another universe, then it means that somehow all the infinite universes fit together because they are constraining each other, meaning the only outputs you can find in one universe are simply because they don't exist in another universe. Well, whatever the scheme, it doesn't matter. It could be something more complicated than I've just described. But whatever the scheme, as long as the infinite universes are in some type of relationship with each other, then they all belong to a universe, they're a singular structure. They're a singular structure. So in both extremes of this example, you have singular structures. So the entire multiverse idea, it makes no sense, at least to me. If the solution is somewhere in the middle where you have universes that somehow are isolated from each other and somehow are connected to each other, then that doesn't make any sense. It's like finding any structure you have around you. Maybe, I don't know, take a crystal, for instance. What you're saying is that some parts of the crystal are not there, and some parts are there. Now, how is that possible without the overall structure coordinating itself in some way to know where a universe is there and where a universe is not there? What I'm trying to say is that it's impossible to find this type of arrangement where there's no interconnection. Because if there's no interconnection, then the laws of space and time don't make any sense. So a universe can both be there and not be there at the same time. It would have no way of knowing because the two universes cannot interact, or the infinite copies of the universes, they cannot interact with each other. What I'm trying to say is that the multiverse hypothesis has very little to do with the universe itself than with our perception of it. Because the way the multiverse theory is described, it's described as like a decision tree. And that gives a very strong hint that it's not the multiverse. Whatever we're describing in that hypothesis, it's not out there. It's in your head. It's how you understand outcomes in reality. There are choices to be made. So every time a choice is made one way or the other, but choices are not just things that human beings make. Choices are things that everything makes. All the molecules of air bumping into each other, All the molecules in your body, minute to minute, second to second, moment to moment, they're interacting with each other. They're making decisions. And that decision making on the quantum Fermi level is cascading up to what? Astronomical levels. Through this, we somehow, in the scale of things, the scale of all things, we somehow occupy the middle of that scalar structure between the infinitely small and the infinitely large. So, whatever the multiverse hypothesis is supposed to be, it's describing operations that take place within our head. We see the universe as this grainy, foamy, interconnected structure, and yeah, that's because we can't see the whole of space and time. We see space, because we are spatial creatures, but we are inexorably carried through time. So our consciousness, our self-awareness is a catastrophe on the edge of a temporal space that is expanding. I've talked about this on one of my podcasts. That's what we see as the expansion of the universe. It's not a universe that is expanding. It's consciousness, because light is consciousness. See, before you can describe light as a physical thing out there, it is first perceived as part of the self, as part of your awareness. So there is only ever one universe. That's what I'm trying to say. There's only ever one universe. Because what the universe is the universe is always collapsing into its most stable structure. It's always searching. That's what the decision making is all about. It's always searching for stability. And stability means that there is a balance among the way. It's like a mechanism. Whatever the original unified field theory is, existence is constantly trying to balance that theory out in practice. Trying to be more like that theory. So when you look at things like entropy and how it increases over time, this is the perception. There's a perception that is tied to the way we understand ourselves. The universe might have no entropy. It might not even know what entropy is. It probably doesn't care. Who knows? So what the best we can know is we can know about ourselves. Our minds, our consciousness. We keep thinking, if you look at the multiverse theory, in the multiverse hypothesis deeply, you will immediately realize that this is preposterous. Everything is making a decision. Every unit of existence, however you want to define that unit, is making a decision. It's changing moment to moment. So are you trying to tell me that there is a universe for every potential unit change in the universe? That doesn't make any sense. What we are describing is the behavior of a complex adaptive system. That's what we're describing are the properties of our brains. The way our brain understands reality, the way it computes reality, the way it processes reality. Because that's the way it processes our sense of self. So our sense of self is a construct, and the sense of self that we experience is dependent on the type of thing we have constructing it. Because it is mimicking something much deeper, much more fundamental than space-time. It's on the same level as space-time because it's also a fundamental concept. At the beginning before the universe was born, were the fundamental concepts of existence. You can be creative and try to find out what they are, but they're root concepts, and that's the whole point. In order to find these root concepts, you have to go to the root of your own awareness. And when you find those root concepts, it is those root concepts that give birth to a universe. That's what the Sephiras are. in Judaism. That's the construct. The construct where these are root concepts that now spin off physical existence. But you see, you have those kind of similar type of representations going back across cultures for thousands of years. So this is not something that we're discovering in the 21st century because we're so brilliant. Humanity has had the same type of construction in its head for at least 250,000 years, give or take, thereabouts. A sense of a rudimentary, or even, no, not a rudimentary, a sense of self as separate from the rest of nature. So, and these concepts of self, they're the roots, meaning that they're not readily accessible as self-awareness. It's not, we're talking of things that are on the same epistemological plane as space-time itself. Space-time is a construct, but that construct is what we created to understand engineering and physical problems. It is space-time that was revisited by Einstein in 1905, projecting it from the work of Isaac Newton in the 17th century. It's always about space-time, because in this type of realization which we have today, space-time is a root concept because of what? Science and technology. Science and technology they emerge out of the concept of space-time. That's why almost all physical problems in the physical sciences, they're all functions of space and time. Because without space-time, you cannot define those problems from a physical or mathematical or an engineering point of view. That's really what it is. But these concepts, like space-time, these fundamental concepts, human beings have always, in some way, been able to intuit them for thousands of years. And based on those fundamental units of existence or concepts, those fundamental concepts, because those are the fundamental concepts that emerge from this. I mean, it depends on how religious you are. I'm just going to call God. These fundamental concepts emerge out of that. And because of the way they emerge and what they are, by virtue of what they are, they begin to spin a physical universe that will ultimately come to contain physical beings that try to mimic it. It's not that they're trying to mimic it. Physical reality does not have a choice, really, than to mimic this emergence. Why? Well, it has to do with the nature of perfection and imperfection. I don't want to go too deep into that, but one of the greatest headaches in theology or any type of religious thinking is, how can a perfect God create a reality that is filled with so much imperfection? And my answer to that is that he can't really. Yeah, sounds crazy. He can't really. Because what we see as imperfection, what we see as mistakes, errors, and broken things and all that, is a perspective in perfection. A perspective so unique, it requires a physical, universal structure to implement it. So it looks like imperfection. It looks like chaos. It looks like something that's broken down. But beyond that, and this is really why, beyond that is a different type of awareness that only sees that perfection. And that's the whole point. That imperfection and perfection, like the universe and the metaverse or the multiverse, they're all properties which we're processing. We're processing them every single day, every minute. That's how we define our existence. And this is very important, isn't it? That's how we define existence. That's how we define our reality. Our realizations are defined from these root concepts. And it doesn't matter what you believe. As long as you're alive, you're self-aware, you are processing these fundamental things at the root